what I'm about to say.
Yeah, I'm like,
The one's not
which
going
way
to
do you look the best?
No.
We're about 345 pounds.
That's amazing. I watched it. I'll tell you see about your views and stuff and people writing.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
I didn't get one since I still can't get one.
Well, it's coming up.
Oh, that's what
Yeah, it's not out yet. So I just went to a friend of mine's, what do you call it, a visitation.
Wait.
Steve Kirby, one of my best friends, died this past week of COVID.
Of COVID?
COVID. He was my age and a lot tougher than I was. So.
Did he have any health problems or anything?
Not really, no. Great guy.
Yeah, I knew Steve. I knew his mother.
Did
His mother was my teacher.
Oh, is that right?
Kitty. I loved her, and she was my she was my teacher at Cleveland High School. First, she came and took somebody's place who got sick in the middle of the year. Mm-hmm. And she and I got to be good friends. And then when I got out of law school, she became my client.
Is that
in
right?
A law firm. Yeah, she's a great lady.
Was that Cleveland High School?
Yeah.
I never knew that.
Yeah, she taught.
I don't remember. Was she there when I was?
No, she came. She came in the middle of about my junior year, I think, at Cleveland High School, and so I just got to knowing her. And, you know, some people you just hit it off with.
Right, yeah.
She was one of those people, and then she just stayed my friend. And when I got out of law school, she just became my client. And I helped her and her family on some things.
They're a great family.
I thought a lot of her.
How long did he have it?
I don't know. I hadn't heard many details. It was really sad.
That
Really
is weird, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. Did you just drive down from Nashville today?
I drove down Friday evening because I was doing some work and I got finished, and so I came.
Jim told me you were one of the best real estate agents in Nashville.
He might have been a little partial.
He was partial, but he told you the truth on that one. So, how many years you have been? You and Dick for several years were the number one producers in your agency.
Yeah.
In Nashville
7.
for 7 straight years.
But we
Let's see, now say that again. 7 straight years.
we were number 1
She
for
and
Middle
Dick
Tennessee
were-
at the Cry-Like.
Boy, that's a lot, isn't it?
But we left Cry-Like and went to Bob Parks, and it's been a very humbling experience because they've got some amazing, unbelievable. So finally, it took. I started there July 2018. It took Dick and I from July 2018 to last month. We finally made it to number 2. There's 800 agents in Bob Parks.
800.
And man, there's some good ones on there.
Do y'all combine your sales to be one sale?
Who, Dick and I?
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
Dick keeps me out front a lot, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Who does the paperwork?
Well, that's not my strength, but I have somebody now that does contract to close.
Everybody's got their gift.
Yeah.
Judy's
my gift.
is meeting people face to face and doing the sales part. Dick's is much more the administrative part.
So he does more of the paperwork.
Well, he keeps track of. We have a lady though that works for us now. A lot of realtors are going to this contract to close because there's so many deadlines.
Oh,
in that.
yeah.
Inspections, things you got to meet. So she is a godsend. I pay her extra because I need her a little sometimes at night or something. Seems like we just sold our biggest house we've ever sold. Was it October, I think, or September? 10,800,000
For one house.
One house, cash.
That would go against the minimalist theory, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
It's 12,000 square feet. It wasn't that it was so huge, but it had limestone. It took a year.
A year.
A year to lay the Tennessee limestone in the house. It's amazing.
Can you imagine spending a year or more on something like that and taking away one of the 90 years you got? You ever think about that?
I never thought of it like that.
I
mean, think about that. It's not just the money aspect, but the fact that you're spending one of your years building a house. It's kind of like, dummy.
Well, I tell you one thing I think of now that getting it to be this age is
42.
Yeah, 42 so far in the rear view I can't even remember it. But at this age, Dee, I do think more about, and my dad, I remember my dad telling me, and he was so right, but saying, Mike, you can't believe how fast 40 to 50 goes, and then you really won't be able to believe how fast 50 to 60 goes. And I found that to be true. And so now, unless it's something I really want to do, respectfully, you just got to say no on some things and just say, no, I'm not going to use what free time I have on that.
It's really hard to balance, isn't it?
Yeah, and especially with all the, and there's something else my dad told me I was thinking coming over.
Well, he was giving you a lot of pearls. I got hardly any.
It's because you were out selling.
I was out selling something.
But my dad, he used to, when I first came back from law school and I got asked to be on this board or go be on that board or this committee or that committee, and I remember he looked at me and I said, well, you think I'll do this or you think I'll do that? And he looked at me and said, Mike, son.
No, it was like this.
Yeah,
Two hands.
Mike, son, he said, there's enough things out there to make a man go broke. And he was right. I mean, you could do enough good things, really good things, being on everything and to never have any time to see your family or to do your job.
When he said go broke, he wasn't just talking financially. He was talking about.
He was talking about starting at home. You'll break your family. I mean, you won't see them. You won't see your kids because you're doing really good things.
Yeah.
But you're
Well,
always.
I think that's where they get that saying, charity begins at home.
Yeah.
I never thought of
Good
that.
word. Yeah.
That's the truth.
Yeah.
But whenever I would go with, I was real good friends with Jim, and we would especially go every January to lunch.
Yes.
We'd go any time during the year, but January the 2nd, I'd call Sally and say, Sally, when's Jim available this month? And it would be we'd change it or time, but it was always within January.
Yes.
And he would say, Dee, and he always did his hands like this.
That is true.
Where will you be in the next 5 years? What was significant about the 5? I've thought about that. I think it was the fact that you can change 5 years. Maybe you can't change next year or 2 years from now, but 5 years is changeable. Does that make sense?
Yes. It was funny. We're having this talk today, and I don't know if you were at my dad's funeral or not.
Oh, I was, yeah.
But you may not remember this, but Sarah, my daughter, spoke and talked about my dad, and she said, I think I was the only kid in second grade that had a 5-year plan.
I remember that.
That was the truth.
Well,
5 year.
Yes, my dad, my dad had all kinds of yellow legal pads. That was his, and I do too now. But my dad, for the last 30 years of his life, I've got his legal pad where he wrote down his goals for the last 30 years. And so, what's the 5-year plan? So come January 1, I can still remember seeing my dad in his office writing down his goals for next year and, kind of what's the 5-year plan for him. Mm-hmm. Even when, about a year before he died in 2017, he was still had a plan. And
I didn't know you had those notebooks. Did you?
I tell people at church, because I'm very similar to my dad in that way. I do the same thing, have my 5-year plan.
Right.
And
I never saw him write much down, though. I don't see him as a write downer. I guess he did when he was away from people, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
But not.
He would never show you. He showed me because I'd asked to see them.
Yeah.
Because I want to know what they were. Well, he asked me to see mine.
Yeah.
So I said, all right, let me see yours. But my dad was just, I tell people at church that my dad had a plan for having a plan. And then, here's more important, he had a plan for executing the plan. Now, here's what we want to do, so now how are we going to do it?
Logistics.
Yes. Yeah. It was much more than just having a plan or a goal out there. He had a plan to reach the goal.
What was his, I knew him as a good friend, but what was it like having him as a father? Because that would have had some different dynamics, right?
Yeah, we could tell you some good.
Go ahead, there, Judy.
He, I think the thing I remember the most about him that I really appreciated, because I seemed to be in trouble quite a lot. I mean, just different things, not bad things, but I was rambunctious. He was very calm. So, I mean, if I came home And he always said, Judy, really, you don't need to tell me all that. I don't need to know it all. Because I would want to confess.
Yeah.
It was kind of like
Yeah.
the priest.
Yeah.
I would always say, Daddy, I need to tell you I've sinned, and here's what I did. And he would always be calm, and he never would act mad about it. He'd say, well, how do you plan to fix that? Or he'd always give me a chance. Never screamed at me. And I love that.
I don't think he thought that would get anywhere.
Yeah.
That wasn't a plan of action.
Well, that was not who he was
yeah.
either. I mean, he was. I don't ever remember seeing him. I remember seeing him get mad a few times in my life, but very few, and don't really ever remember him raising his voice. I mean, he was firm.
I remember that part.
Well, but he was firm, and you didn't want to cross him if he was serious.
One thing that I always was a little odd to me is when I would go eat with him, I'd meet him, and he'd make me drive his car. What was the point of that?
Oh, gosh.
I mean,
Well,
he would make me drive his car.
he wasn't a great driver, or he didn't think he was. He was actually really a pretty good driver because he went so slow all the time. I'm going to answer that, but I'm going to go back and tell you something on your question. One of the things that you said, what was it like growing up around our house?
Yeah.
And one of the things I would tell you, growing up around our house, it was pretty much, as odd as this sounds, nothing was off limits to discuss. Mm-hmm. And if you had something on your mind, you wanted to lay it up on the table. My dad, regularly, not weekly, but about monthly, we have a round table discussion at our house.
Family conference.
And he wanted to know, okay, what do you think about that? Well, I'm thinking about doing $1 million subdivision, or I'm thinking about whatever. We just sit down here at the table. What do you think about it, Mike? And we were doing that from the time we were 10. And pretty much on a very regular basis from the earliest I remember, from about age 8 or 10 coming through the time he died, we were having roundtable discussions, and your view was just as important as Judy's or mine or my mother's or his. And so one of his sayings was, just lay your pistol right up here on the table.
I don't even say.
He did his hand like that,
Yes.
too, with him.
Uh-huh.
But he would make you feel like that he was actually wanting your opinion, that it might even change his opinion.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, he had a great way about doing that.
Yeah. Well, and he would, and I love this about him. I love this about anybody who has this gift, because so few people have this gift, I think. He really made you feel like he wanted to know about you.
That's right.
And it was important to him to, well, Dee, how are you doing? And he would, it's one of the things I tell from time to time to my little granddaughter, the youngest one, who's now 8, but she, especially the last 4 years, when she asks you a question, not like we as adults say, well, Dee, how are you doing? And we just, what I call the political handshake, and just kind of pull you through and keep on going. My dad would ask you a question, and Avery Kate, my little granddaughter, would ask you a question, and really stop and look and listen.
Oh, yeah.
I really want to, I'm asking you.
He'd even tilt his head like that, kind of.
Yes. Well, it's pretty gifted, especially, I think, in today's world, for somebody to ask you something and really, really want to know the answer. And beam into what you've got to say. And my dad would do that, and he always did that, though. And it didn't matter. I remember when we were little kids growing up in Jellicoe, going to a guy's house, and I remember his name was Albert Webb. And Albert Webb was very poor in the financial sense. He had like 10 or 12 kids. And we would go to Albert Webb's all the time. And he was one of my dad's closest friends. And my dad would sit and talk with Albert Webb as much as he would sit and talk with the governor of the state of Tennessee.
Made no difference.
And was equally interested in hearing, well, Albert, what's happening? Tell me about what's going on with you. And it was fun, but we did it all the time.
I think equally interested was the key. He was equally interested in the other person.
Yes.
And I think it was to see what he could get from it. If he didn't, he made me think it was.
Well, of course, he was, and you've heard that phrase lifelong learner. He was a lifelong learner. He wanted to learn something new, and if you could teach him something, yeah.
Was he on a schedule?
Jim Sharp schedule.
Was
That was it.
Was it routine?
Well, I don't know, kinda.
He was on his schedule.
Yeah.
You said it right.
I mean, he got up every morning and
he and my mother,
exercised.
they were both. My mother still is. My mother gets up every morning with World D, and is on her treadmill even now at 80, getting ready to be 87 this week from.
She's in good shape.
She's in great shape. Hadn't gained a pound, and she's getting ready to be 87, and still weighs 98 pounds. And
Disgusting.
and kind of like you saying that you ride the bicycle 40, 50 miles
Yeah,
a day. Well,
yeah.
my mother walks the treadmill, and my dad did too, pretty much up until the time he was, too sick to go. But he was.
If I remember right, it was 5 o'clock in the morning.
That's right.
My mother gets up at 4:45, and so she'd already be doing her thing, and he'd get up 15 minutes after her and go have his quiet time, but he'd be on the treadmill. But he was on it, as Judy said, Jim Sharp's schedule. But now he had to be on Sue Sharp's schedule too.
In the morning, yes.
Sue, but they are still both of them the most disciplined people you've ever known.
I'd say if I was guessing, compared to her, he wasn't that schedule oriented, but compared to anybody else, he was. Does
Yes,
that make sense?
That's right. That's a good way to say it.
Is this one of the earlier pictures you have of them?
Yes, was that the day they got married, or what was that?
It's close, I
Can you
think.
see that, Gwen?
Yeah, that's the early.
That looks just like her right now.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Jim had a
little thinner.
little, yeah.
Yeah, that was.
That's his smile, though.
Yes, and that my parents, and you may know this story from having hung around with them. My parents got married their senior year of high school when they were both 17 years old, and they were. We were talking about it today. They went and got married at the Justice of the Peace office in I think Corbin, Kentucky, or Williamsburg, Kentucky, lived at Jellicoe, and drove home, and this is in Jellicoe, Tennessee now, or Elk Valley, Tennessee, really, and went home and planted potatoes. Is what they did.
That's romantic, isn't it?
But that picture you see there, I think, was my
Yeah.
dad was either getting ready to go or he'd just come back to Memphis State. My dad had a football scholarship to UT, and back in those days, if you were married, UT had a rule that they canceled your scholarship. So once he got married, UT canceled his scholarship, and so he ended up then getting a scholarship and going to Memphis State and playing football. And that's you see how thin he is there.
Yeah.
That he was.
They wouldn't have known he was married, but his brother told it, didn't he? Isn't that how they found out? UT found out.
I believe his brother got mad because he got married because his brother really wanted to go to UT and play football, and so he told on him.
And he lost the scholarship.
I don't know, but what the story was, but anyway, he lost a scholarship at UT, and so he ended up having to go to Memphis State instead.
Now, during that era, he was at Jellicoe. That was a backwoods, right?
Oh, Lord. Yeah, back in that era, though, and if you see pictures of Jellicoe where he and my mother grew up, now it was funny, my mother's dad.
Do you think this picture was taken in Jellicoe?
Oh,
Obviously,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
That picture
Yeah.
was taken at my mother's house on the hill in Jellicoe. That house that's in that picture is still there, believe it or not.
Is that right?
Yes, and so, but that was at my mother's house. But it's funny, my mother was a very proper Southern lady whose daddy was the in-town preacher of the local Church of God
Church
in Jellicoe Church of God. And my dad lived off out in a place called Elk Valley, and his dad worked on the railroad, later became a preacher too. But that's Jellicoe. But Jellicoe at the time, if you look, and I've read back at, just looking at population and numbers, Jellicoe at the time had more population then than they do now. It was a thriving coal mining place back in that time. And so there's had a couple hotels and
Kind of like I guess Copper Hill would have been at
Yes.
one time more busier than Bradley County.
very similar to a Copper Hill situation. And then once the coal ran out up there, just like once the copper stopped up there, all the people left.
You know, do we think about in the future that could happen to Bradley County or Cleveland? We say, no, it couldn't, but so did they.
Sure, I'm sure they always just figured it'd be a thriving.
The key would be diversity with your industry.
Of course, now with everything, technology and stuff, it's not necessarily geographically oriented. Now, you know who else was from Jellicoe? John Paul Douglas.
Yes, John. It's funniest thing.
I've got his picture in there.
Yeah, John Paul was from Jellicoe. T. Roy Jones. I don't know if you know T. Roy.
I've heard that name my whole life.
From First Baptist Church. He grew up in Jellicoe for a while. Sally, my dad's secretary, believe it or not, Sally, she was from Jellicoe.
I knew that. I remember hearing that. But I think she told me she didn't really know him at the time.
I don't think they really didn't. They sort of knew each other maybe through a church, or she knew my mother. More about my mother because my mother's dad was the pastor, and everybody kind of knows who the preacher is. But I think because I remember when we were just really, really little, Sally, my dad's secretary, and her sister was a lady named Sweetie, Sally Seiler, and Sweetie Seiler was their name. And I remember knowing the Seiler sisters who went to Jellicoe Church of God.
How old were you there when y'all moved to Cleveland?
We moved to Cleveland, Dee, in it was right before, I believe, my 7th birthday. Yes, we moved to Cleveland in August, right before my 7th birthday. So that would have been about 1967. And when my dad, of course, you know this, we came here to be him to be principal at Cleveland High School. Mm-hmm. Cleveland High School had been open 1 year, and we moved here in August. Going to start the school year. That's when they didn't start school.
Was that the first year it was there?
No, it was the second year.
Second year.
The first year it was there, a guy was principal there named
Jim Traylor.
Jim Traylor.
What year would that have been that he was here? That he came here?
That my dad came here. It was August of 1967.
Well, let me say this. This is interesting. We lived on Norman Chapel Road.
Yeah.
And I remember we had a babysitter that went to that school, and she took me there as as some school project, and I had to eat cookies, and I wouldn't talk. I just remember that.
Yeah.
So it's unusual that it's very likely that he was the principal that very time
when you were over there.
Yep.
Isn't that odd?
That is odd.
I mean, think about that. And now you're sitting here.
Oh.
And you're his. I mean, that's not really connected, but you can't make this stuff up either.
No. I see people all the time now, Dee, who I did not know. I'll see people, for example, on jury duty, or people in a trial or something, who will come up to me after and say, "Hey, I don't know you, but your dad was my principal at Cleveland High School in 1968. Or he was only there, I guess, 3 years.
3 years.
3 years. That was back in the Bill Emmendorfer days, and Greg Davis and
Frazier, Mike
Frazier, Bill Varnell,
Steve
Benton, Alan Jones was there during that time. Some really, really good people who've gone on to be very successful businessmen and businesswomen, and done well in life, and I still love bumping into those folks. And
so you think Alan Jones was there when your dad was? How long was your dad principal there?
Just 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah, I remember. This is, of course, back in when you can imagine coming from Jellicoe to Cleveland, Tennessee. I remember, of course, we'd never been anywhere.
No, we hadn't.
We had never been on. I don't think that when we moved to Cleveland, we had never been on vacation. I mean, because when it was vacation in Jellicoe, I remember when my dad, he was teaching and coaching and doing that. Vacation was for that 2 weeks in the summer, you hauled hay.
Yeah.
That's what he did. Well,
we got to ride the last bale.
We got to ride on top of the hay.
Did you haul a lot of hay?
We hauled a bunch of hay.
Boy, that's a miserable job. I hauled a bunch of hay.
I love that job. It was some of my fondest memories, Dee. I was talking the other day.
Boy, it was hot. I think you're forgetting how hot it was.
It was hot.
You can't breathe.
Your arms get torn up.
No water till you're done.
Honestly, I love that. And some of my fondest memories of time with my dad and friends, even now growing up. But my dad, that's what we were again talking about some of the best things we learned from our dad. One of the best things both of us agreed was my dad believed in working. And that's like I said, so when we moved to Cleveland, we go back to that, we never, of course I'm just 7 years old, but never been on vacation or anything like that. But I remember pulling up to Cleveland High, and then we'll come back to the hay hauling thing. But I remember pulling up to Cleveland High. Were you with us?
Well, I hope I was part of the family.
Well,
No, they just took Mike the first time.
if Judy's had a better offer for somebody else doing something, she'd do that. But I remember pulling up to Cleveland High School and never having been anywhere but Jellicoe, frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never ever been to UT or anything like that. But we pulled up. I remember at Cleveland High School, and that's back to when the Dome was there. And
Oh yeah, that was big.
we might as well have been pulling up to Notre Dame's campus.
Yeah.
Because I mean, the Dome and
big.
Yeah, and the football stadium and just the school.
The games were amazing.
And it was in Cleveland High School was brand new, and man, they were unbelievably good. So I remember, the couple 3 years that my dad was at Cleveland High School, they never lost a game until like his third year there, and even then only. And I remember they lost to Loudon. I remember being at this game up there.
You do?
Yeah, and my dad took me into the locker room, and I swear it was like somebody had died because it was the first game they had lost in
years,
in forever. And they were all crying. It was a terrible thing.
Yeah.
But I never forgot that being in that locker room under the stadium at Loudon's stadium up there, and had just gotten beat. And
Isn't it funny the memories that are just actually fleeting moments, but something will stick with us the rest of our life.
I can tell you who was crying, Dee.
Isn't that weird?
Steve Benton, but I can Bobby Scott, the head coach.
Oh, he was a good football coach.
Who now they've named the field house after over here at the Cleveland High School.
But why do you remember that, but you don't remember 10 minutes after or 10 minutes before?
Yeah. I don't. Of course, that was one of the great things.
Made an impression, yeah.
Judy and I can both tell you is best thing I did. If you said, Mike, what's the best thing your dad ever did for you? I said, well, number one, he taught me the importance of being a godly Christian person of integrity. Mm-hmm. That'd be first. Yeah. But then the next thing I would tell you is he spent unbelievable amount of time with us. And if he went some places he shouldn't even take us, you guys come go with me. Mm-hmm. And he'd just go. So if my dad was going down to the locker room as the principal at Cleveland High School, hey, come on, Mike, let's go down here. Well,
I didn't get to go in the locker room.
Well, but you can imagine as an 8-year-old kid or something at the
that was a big deal.
Oh,
because they were so owed at the time to you.
Well, it was a big job. It was almost like you were with somebody really famous. Your dad was the principal of the school, and everybody thought that was great.
Yeah, but I just remember he would always, everywhere he went, he'd take us, and that's kind of like hauling hay. Well, hauling hay was that's a fun event. I didn't dread that. It was a fun event because
it was always an event because they would have. The guy that was in charge had it scheduled out, and he was wanting to get this much hay put up by a certain amount of time. And the guy was going to cut it, and then it was going to. So it was a big deal, wasn't it? It
was huge. It meant summer where you were really in the thick of summer.
I can smell it today, and I can think of I hauled for Johnny Moore and the Moores out on Chatham Valley Road.
Oh yeah. Well, when you said that, I remember myself, Randy McCoy, James Wright, and somebody else we played football together. Somebody else out at James Wright's farm, out off of Shillcut Road, out in there where Jackie Evans lives in that area, out in there. We were hauling hay, and we sort of made a bet, say, could we haul like 137 bales in less than 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And I remember we did it.
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah. Today we would all die.
Hey, let me tell you this story, not to brag, but I was hauling for Hugh Randolph, Kim's daddy.
Yeah.
And me and this other guy was on this side of the tractor. and these two other guys were on this side. And I was really trying to do good. And he stopped, turned around, and said, "Hey, so-and-so," his name was Greg. He said, "You get on the other side and help them two boys. Dee'll get this side and be waiting on y'all at the end." I always remember that.
Yep. Well, and
I could throw it.
yeah,
There was a flip. It was
Yes.
a flip. It was a flip and a knee.
and the thing, and I until you just said that, it gave one of those flashbacks.
Yeah.
But I remember my dad. There was also an art to loading the load where it wouldn't fall off when you're headed off down the road.
That was very important.
Yes, and I mean getting it, set just right, just like laying bricks,
Yeah.
kind of. And I had forgotten it, but my dad, I remember at an early age, my dad teaching me to load a truckload of hay, so when you're driving 10 miles down the road to somebody's barn or something, it doesn't fall off.
You could relate that to his 5-year plan.
That's the truth.
Yes, just
It was a plan.
Because don't let it fall off.
yeah.
That's right.
You're right.
That's a good point.
I saw a guy one time, his name was Frank Falk. He could throw a bale of hay 13 layers high in place.
Oh,
What? How big was he?
Oh, he was a strong guy. He was no bigger, taller than Mike, but he was stout. He could throw 13 bales high in place. Let me tell you about Capstar Bank. They're located in Nashville, Hendersonville, Gallatin, Athens, Madisonville, Sweetwater, Etowah, and in Cleveland at 950 25th Street and 3855 North Ocoee Street. I've used them. I like them. Give them a try. They're no problem.
much as me, but one of the things my dad always would tell me, and it was fun. I don't ever remember dreading, hauling hay or working with him. But he'd say, "Mike, by the end of this summer, you're going to want to go back to school."
He had ways about him.
And he'd pay you good. He'd, any job we ever did, I mean, he'd pay you a little more than his worth, actually, just to do your job. But he was right. I mean,
you never knew what he was trying to push.
Yeah, but there was a purpose.
There was a purpose.
We kind of knew some things he made.
Well, yeah.
Well, believe me, we knew.
Yeah, especially about.
Do you think he had the things that he taught you about selling? Because he could sell.
Yeah,
he developed how many subdivisions?
24.
24 subdivisions, and he would sell. I tell you this story. I had some acreage development up here on Mouse Creek Road, and I divided it up, and he'd always want to go up there with me and look at it.
Yeah.
And two things happened. I said, this is really weird, but I said, "Jim, I've got this wet spot that keeps coming out of the ground. I can't get it to stop. I'm thinking about putting a drain," and I had this whole big plan. He said, "Dee, it may just stop." And it stopped.
It did? That's amazing.
I had worried with it for 2 years. He said, "Dee, it may just stop." And it stopped. Now you figure that one out.
Yeah.
But now I'll tell you this other one. So I said, "Jim," I showed him my price list and how I had it figured. And he said, "Dee," he leaned over and said, "Dee, quit thinking about price per acre." What he was trying to get me to do is not set a value on the size of it, but on the usefulness of it to the customer.
Yes. Yeah.
He said, "Get off that," and then later "Dee, get off that price per acre." Do you think because he could sell?
Absolutely, he could sell.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
What was it made him be able to sell?
What do you say?
Well, I do think he was genuinely interested in people, and he could never give you enough. I mean, Daddy he wanted you to feel good after that sale. And he wasn't pushy on the money. I mean, he wanted you to feel good about things, that you did business. And the more he could give you, the happier he was, wasn't it?
Well, we were talking earlier about John Wooden's maxims.
Yeah.
My dad had the 10 maxims. I don't know if you remember this, up on his wall in his office.
I don't remember that one.
And
Is that before the robbery or after? Remember, had the robbery?
yeah.
Talk about the few
robber
times he
didn't
got
take
mad. He was mad about
He was
that.
upset about that.
Yeah.
The robbers didn't take the maxims. They didn't mean anything to them. But 2 or 3 of the maxims had to do with always give the customer a little more than they ask for. Mm-hmm. But also always give them something that will be of more value later than it is today. In other words, don't develop a subdivision that the only person that's going to do any good here is you. And when you're gone, it's kind of like buying a car. You know, most cars ever worse when it's sitting on the lot and you drive off, it just automatically goes down. That violated every principle in my dad's world. He thought that was awful. And so if ideally in his world, if you bought a lot from him in his subdivision this year, next year if you sold it, it ought to be worth a little more, because that subdivision be getting a little bit better, and you know, the road, because the road was set in there right, the lots laid up just right, you know, at a proper.
He even thought about how they would have to mow it over time.
He would always tell me, Mike, if the grade is more than 6% or something, that won't turn out to be a good yard for a man. And he's right.
Yep.
I mean, because the mower's going to slide off down the hill and rip the grass out of the ground and that kind of thing, or you're going to have some kind of ground cover that you're maintaining. But my dad, one of the things I think made him such a good seller, he would look down the road 5 years from now and say, okay, what's this going to be worth 5 years from now? Because if it's going down in value, I'm not doing you right. You asked about Judy and my dad. They are so much alike.
They are a lot alike
on the sale, as far as that she learned all the good sales things.
She's addicted to it.
Well, she is, and that's one of the reasons makes her. But what she said about my dad is really, really important for you to feel good about what you just bought from him. Well, the same, Judy, sometimes I want to just stop. That's enough. And so, because she is exactly the same
Jim
way.
wanted the next sale that you were going to get him.
Yes.
He was not worried about that one because he already had that one. He was worried about the one you were going to get him. He was trying to make sure that everything was good, that he did. I remember somebody had a drainage problem on one of his lots. It just worried him to death. And I said, Jim, when did you sell him that house? He said, it was 22 years ago. I said, Jim, a lot of stuff could happen then. But what just worried him? It worried him.
Yeah. I remember my dad always in the subdivision, he wanted all the mailboxes to be the same.
Yeah.
You know, look good, uniform. And even up until the time he died, in some of these subdivisions he had developed 25 years ago, he's still having his worker people go replace the mailboxes for him. And I remember my mother asking, well, Jim, when are we going to stop doing that?
And you know, those were expensive mailboxes. They're like $475.
Yeah, they were expensive mailboxes, but he just felt like.
He brought to Cleveland a new level of subdivisions. They weren't all cookie cutter lots. They went with the terrain.
Yeah.
They went with the ridge, with the view. Every lot was considered how it would benefit. If another spot on the lot benefited something else, it was another lot.
Yeah. And we've talked about this. My dad had this. Sometimes, and I watch this with lawyers right now in court. Some lawyers just have a gift or an ability to know the right next question to ask. And it's fun to watch. Mm-hmm. And they got a strategy and they have a plan, and it just flows, and you'll see it at the end of the case. Oh, I see now where you were going with that. Mm. Well, my dad had almost an uncanny ability to see a piece of land and to see where the roads should go. I mean, we looked at Mountain Brook and we looked at Mountain Point and a couple of these places.
Princeton Hills,
But
Summerfield.
some of these farms are just rough old farms that have been cut over by woodcutters years ago and just left the stumps and left the treetops and stuff. Just all they did was cut the logs and take the logs and leave the rest of it laying, and it was rough. And I remember walking in these places with him, and him just like, oh yeah, Mike, right there's where the road will lay right in there, and you know we can put right there's a wonderful lake site, and I'm thinking, what? Where
Yeah,
are you
and
seeing?
he'd actually do his hand like that
Yes.
when he'd
Oh,
say
yeah.
that. Lay the,
Yeah. But
and he'd even show it going around the corner. He'd go,
But he just had, and he, of course, growing up on the land, my dad had a deep love for the land and a deep understanding of dirt. I mean, there's no other way. Paul Kahn told him that when he went and helped Lee University
I remember that,
develop the pedestrian mall, Paul Kahn said, well, Jim, I think you've got a PhD in dirt. And it was really true. He, just where my dad had grown up on the farm and farming and plowing behind a mule and that kind of thing, and just being out on the land, he just, you know, some people are around, their dad's a preacher, and so they learn to preach.
yeah.
Or their dad's a teacher or whatever it is, and they learn because they sit and listen, or lawyer or whatever. And my dad was just around farmers and a lot of good dirt people, and he just soaked that up. And God just gifted him with the ability to see kind of a visionary on a piece of land that most people aren't. So
He just had a gift for that. Just like some people can play the piano. He just had a gift for doing that.
yeah, that's a good analogy, I think.
What did his parents do? What were
gosh.
they like? Do you remember them?
Yeah, you very much
Oh,
so.
yeah.
Grandpa Sharp and Grandma Sharp. Grandpa, I remember, he was a minister, never had his driver's license. Somebody always picked him up and took him to church to preach.
Was he a Church of God?
Was it Mountain Assembly?
Yeah, church go to the Mountain
Mountain
Assembly.
Assembly. And then Grandma Sharp, she raised 8 kids. He was one of 8. He was the youngest.
He
of
was the
8.
youngest. I
Yeah.
remember that.
And I remember that Grandma Sharp would churn butter. And I got to churn it too. I know more than that. I'm just kidding. But that's what, churning butter, and we'd stay over there, and they had a party line. And Mike and I used to listen in on the party line, to listen to everybody talking on the phone.
Yeah, they were very rural people.
Yeah.
They were good folks. I always thought, growing up, my grandpa Sharp, he was one of the most serious people I ever knew. And my dad got that from him. But one of the best men I ever knew was my grandpa Sharp. Just solid citizen, Christian character, Christian integrity, very quiet. Would speak only when it was necessary to speak kind of person. But he worked on the railroad. That was his job. And then he came home and farmed. And then on the weekends, he was the bivocational preacher. And he had a little church off out somewhere up in the
I
mountains.
mean, like just preached on the weekend.
Yeah, that was his church,
Yeah.
so he was the
And,
preacher.
yeah, that was him. I believe maybe went through the 8th grade, maybe. And I believe my grandma Sharp might have gone through the 8th grade. I think they got married when they were 16. And then had actually, I think, 9 kids, and one of which died. So there was 8 brothers and sisters, including my dad.
Well, I never knew that. Thank you for sharing that. I never knew
But-
that.
You know, another story I remember, Jim, I was with him one day, and I said, Jim, I said, I do this job for these people, and I have to do this other stuff, and this other stuff, and this other stuff, and you know, it's hard to charge for that stuff. And he said, Dee, you know, and he always told me this. He said, Dee, he said, back when I was young, he said, I would go to this lady's house. I may have this story wrong, but I got the main part of it. He said he would go to their house, and I believe he said he would either deliver the milk or milk their cows. Which would it be?
He delivered.
delivered.
He would deliver their milk.
Eggs, and butter.
Yeah, he would deliver it for them. And he said every morning, he said they were one of my better customers. I don't even think he said that. He just said that he delivered their milk. And he said she would ask him to go in and take the bedpan from her husband and toss it outside.
Yep.
He said it was slightly degrading. I wasn't getting paid for that. I didn't know how to tell her no, but I did it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, what's that got to do with it? He said, sometimes you got to throw out the bedpan. So that was part of giving all you could give.
Yeah. Here's what I would tell you, Dee. My dad had, all he lacked having his PhD was finishing his thesis. And about that point, he decided that he was going to get out of public education and go into full-time land developing, so he didn't finish his thesis. Mm-hmm. But my dad had a very deep, thorough, formal education. He was the only one of his 8 brothers and sisters who did. And so, again, all he lacked to finish his PhD would have been finishing the thesis. But my dad also had an enormous real-world common sense education from what you just described. The people, rural people, like the woman you just, I've heard that story, he's telling me that story. I mean, the Albert Webbs that I mentioned to you earlier, but he had a deep understanding of people and doing a good job, the importance of doing a good job, the importance of doing more than you said you would do, and the importance of just being honest with them. You know, if you said you're going to do it Tuesday at 2, then
Tuesday
best you can, it'd be better to do it by Tuesday at 2 or a little before that. And so I would just tell you, some of the best stuff I learned from my dad in politics, in church, and whatever else, none of that came from a formal school setting. It's just all good common sense. You know, from Jellicoe, Newcomb, Elk Valley 101 kind of things.
You know, what he learned from education in college was not what made Jim what he is.
Mm-mm. It's valuable.
But it didn't make Jim Jim.
No, it didn't. And the great thing about it was, of course, I guess he said his brother would oftentimes remind him, because all of his brothers, highly successful people.
And they were quite a bit older than him, if I remember.
Yes, he was way the youngest in the family. But his brothers, he said, would often remind him, Jim, there's a lot of educated idiots out there, so don't be like that. And so he never forgot that. But
do you ever go back to Jellicoe?
Oh yeah.
And wander the streets and?
Well, I don't know that we wandered the streets.
I don't go to Norman Chapel Road. That's probably about the time we left there.
I still love to go through Jellicoe. Melanie and I, at least once a year, and sometimes twice a year. This year, my cousin who lives up in the Cincinnati area, his daughter got married, and so my mother's sister is still up there with him, and so we, coming back from Cincinnati, or a little town outside of Cincinnati, we went through Jellicoe, and just to show my mother, her old house that's now gone, but that house I showed you in the picture, it's still there. But our old house, that the first house my parents ever built, is still there. And I just pulled right up in the driveway, and it was a circle driveway where my dad built the house, and just went right around the circle driveway, much to my wife's dismay. But just to show and then we drove up into Newcomb, where Judy and I, when we were born, first lived. And so, I love to go back up there. It is rural, really rural, and it's not a place that has thrived through the years. But Judy wouldn't agree with me on this.
Oh my goodness!
It is. I tell you, it's one of the more beautiful. If you like rural mountain places, I think it's still one of the more beautiful.
More like North Carolina.
My district that I get to travel every week in my job, I get to go from Cleveland to Monroe County to McMinn County to Polk County and back. It's just beautiful. The mountains and just all the things that God created that I get to see for free every week. And I love that. It's just beautiful. I love the mountains and the trees.
You drink coffee when you're driving?
I do.
Oh, yeah.
What kind?
Usually Dunkin' Donuts.
And they all know it.
Well, it's a little bit, I like Starbucks better for some reason. You prefer Dunkin' Donuts?
Yeah.
Well, he drinks decaf too.
Yeah.
Well, how come?
Because I'm pretty wired up.
He's wired.
I don't need much extra usually to wire me anymore. So I just Yeah, that's why.
But Dunkin' don't. Would you go to the one over here on the bypass?
I go to the one
Yeah.
over here, and
Yeah.
then the one in McMinn. I know them, and they know
You don't
me.
get a donut, I'm sure.
No, don't eat donuts.
Oh gosh.
But it's great now.
But you weren't always into this health stuff.
I've always been ever since.
You've always worked out.
Is
You're
this
always
you?
an athlete.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Show him this, Gwen. Boy, you look just like your son. I mean, it is a spitting. I didn't know which one that was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
It is.
I mean, it is really weird.
That
If you was to put Matt here, there wouldn't be 10 cents worth of difference. You look more like Matt than you do you.
yeah.
But that's Jim. What was he thinking right there? He's thinking, hurry up with this picture.
Yes. I said now.
Sorry.
We would
So sorry.
Sorry.
we would tell you, Dee.
Turn that off.
And you're the one wired, right? Not her.
Oh no, she's wired through and through.
Could she wait on a 3-minute egg?
There'd be a few projects in between, the start and the finish. I'll tell
Now,
you.
where do you get that?
My mother.
Yeah, mother.
Yeah, obviously.
wired.
Yeah, your mother's just like that.
Yes, very much so.
Right now, she's sweeping
Probably.
or vacuuming.
Probably.
Yeah.
Mopping the
I
counter.
mean, I have told
Wiping.
my mother, Dee, will be 87 next week, and this last week, I always call my mother every morning when I'm headed to wherever I'm headed and just check on her. How you doing?
Yeah.
We'll talk, and I said, well, Sue, she worked out this morning. Oh yeah, that's right, I do. 5:45. I said, so Sue, you're about to be 87 years old, and why could you not sleep? Nobody's gonna get you in trouble. I mean, you set your schedule. Nobody else set your schedule for you, Sue.
Because she cleans the rest of the day.
Oh yeah, she has and that's what she said. Well, Mike, no, that's not what I do. I get up and I'm working out at this time of day. Okay, and
But
that's
Jim would go to the office.
Jim would go to the office. Sue would feed him an egg white.
Yeah.
and
Tablespoon of oatmeal.
yeah, and, some nice health related product. And Jim would go to the office and stop at Hardee's on the way up.
Sally be making him biscuits and gravy.
Yeah.
It's
And be at the Jenkins, what, 11:30,
Usually
11:15?
meet me and some of my
He
buddies.
had his own table.
Yeah, we're table number one.
Is that your table now?
Yes, sir.
Are you kidding? That's yours too?
Yeah. Kay Jenkins, I love
He
Kay.
would never order onion rings, but he would always eat my onion rings.
That's the truth.
That was like
That's the
the
truth.
low calorie version.
Yeah.
If I don't order
Yeah.
it's only half the calories. So
That's
you
the
know,
truth.
He'd say, "D, get some of that." He said, "D, why don't you get some of that French?" He liked that French dressing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He liked that on his onion rings.
Yeah. Yes, I cannot tell you and some of my friends.
He always told us what to order, so he had
Yeah.
all that.
Yeah. I already said, "Do you care for that, Jim?" No, I don't care for you. Go ahead, though. Knowing full well,
you got it.
if you go ahead, I don't have to. Yes.
That's the truth.
But yep, we still have table number one, and me and Matt still sit there at table one.
Do y'all go every day?
We don't go every day. Of course, now you know my job. I'm every other week. I'm
Yeah.
somewhere else usually. But we go a couple of times a week.
When you're out of town, do you go to that same place?
I go to Jenkins in Athens. I love that Jenkins at Athens. And
Where
then
is that Jenkins in Athens?
it's over there. You know where the Daily Post Athenian is, or was? They've closed it down now.
Is it by the hospital?
No, you know where Athens Utilities.
Yep.
It's same Athens
Oh,
Utilities.
okay.
It's quarter of a mile going
Next to-
west from Athens Utilities.
Isn't there Ace over there somewhere? Ace Hardware? Or little Ace is a little further down.
It's further down.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, but it's same trail.
Do you like being judge?
I love being judge. It's every day's different. Every day's exciting. I mean, there's something, and it's interesting to hear what's going on in people's lives, and it's fun if you can help people. Now, some days it's sad because people are in a tough spot or they wouldn't be coming to see you. A lot of times it's judge. But the short answer is I love it. I think God put me here for this time, and until He moves me somewhere else, and I'm thankful to get to be here. But it's a very fun career. There's never been I've been in this job now 13 years. Judge. I practiced law for 18 years, been in this job 13 years.
How old are you?
Younger than you. So
Which one are you?
He's the oldest.
She's way older.
Yeah, in his dreams.
Now let me ask you this. You worked at the chalet, right?
That was my first job. I was a bus girl.
How long were you there?
Well, Eddie Cartwright would let me work every summer, and so I was probably, I don't know, I started when I was a sophomore in high school. I was a bus girl. Then I was a waitress when I graduated and went up to age 15. So I was there probably 3 or 4 years, and then I moved to Holiday Inn, and Big Jim made me
Holiday Inn on the Hill.
on the hill, and I would have to be at work at 5 a.m. because I opened the Holiday Inn up. And Daddy said, "Well, I'll make you do that because I'll keep you out of trouble at night." So, because I'd have to go to bed at 8 o'clock at night, I had to get up at 4.
Do you know I worked at the chalet too?
Were we together?
I don't know. I was
did
wondering
too.
that. What'd you do?
I was a bellhop.
I was a bellhop.
Huh? Who?
Well, y'all had the good
I was
jobs.
a bellhop I worked on Friday nights because I was underage.
Yeah.
And Eddie Cartwright
Yeah.
let me work there.
Yeah.
And I'd sit on that couch next
sir.
to the door.
Yes,
Did you
sir.
sit on the couch?
All the time.
Did you have the key ring?
Yes.
I had the key ring.
And would
you
run.
you could run, and remember you could flip that key ring, and the keys would go around your hand,
Yes.
and you could catch the thing.
Yes. Yeah.
Y'all were doing tricks.
I can remember, and we would. And remember, back at that time, some fairly famous people would come here and stay.
Archie
it was,
Campbell, remember?
Archie, it was the place
met
to
him.
be. I can
Yes.
still hear that door shutting. Can you hear that door? The lobby door.
Yes.
Woof.
Big old wood door.
Woof, yeah.
Yeah.
It was a super nice place to
It was,
stay.
and you remember those suites? They had the suites.
Oh, the
in
suite,
there?
yeah, the 2 stories.
Yeah. I mean,
Remember the
was
Swiss
nice.
house? You had to go.
Yes.
Some people would go to the
Yes.
Swiss house.
Yes. But I remember
What I was. You're a little bit older than me, so you were probably. I was there. Wes Hicks had the full-time job, and I had the part-time
Well, see,
job.
and when I started, Scott Hicks had the full-time job, and me and Tim Henderson had the part-time job.
So it was Scott Hicks, Tim Henderson, Mike Sharp, Wes Hicks, Dee Burris.
Yes.
It took them that long to get it right.
Yes.
That's right. How's it going?
we were. It's funny that you mentioned this, Dee, but I remember, and I don't ever remember getting or feeling like it was hot or anything. I mean, the dead heat of the summer, and when somebody come and check in, we would get their key and run from the
ahead of the car.
Yes,
Because you had to show them how to get around.
and where to park. And I remember, and on a busy, because back in the day, I mean, that was the happening.
It was
It
the
was the
place.
place.
And it'd be full.
It'd be
all the
$1
time.
tip.
Oh yeah,
Easy.
Well, you were talking about Judy. Let me go back. I remember when being, and I don't remember how, if Judy would have been 15 or 16 when she was waiting tables at the Holiday Inn, I would have been 12 or 13. But the thing,
He had to get that in.
yeah, just so everybody knows how. But here's what I remember as a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old. Judy would come home. Now, this is learning sales 101 right here. Judy learned very quickly, if you were good to people and really did a good job waiting tables and treated them good and acted good to them, she would come home, I remember at some Fridays or Saturdays, with, pocketfuls of money.
More than we'd made.
Oh, way more.
We just had change.
Yeah, we get a quarter
Yeah.
or whatever. But Judy, I remember coming home from the chalet and just watching. Of course, as a 12-year-old kid, you're watching your siblings
yeah.
come home with all that money. You think, well, man. And it was, but that to me, my dad putting her there and training her, if you'll work hard and if you'll do a good job and if you'll be good to people, you can make money.
I think that was a key.
I'm telling you, and so Judy, though, I have watched from starting at the chalet, going into the graduating to the Holiday Inn on the hill. But then so Judy took that same principle though, and then became the director of sales for ABC TV in Washington D.C. And
yeah, we've glossed over that. That's a very big thing here.
Yeah, but the same principles that my dad taught about being the milkman.
That's exactly
in
right.
Newcomb, he taught Judy and me to be the waitress or the bellhop or whatever. But then that Judy graduated that up, and I graduated up in a different area. But to become literally the sales manager for ABC TV in Washington D.C. or Seattle, Washington, or all the places.
And number two at Crowlike with 800.
No, it's number one at Crowlike.
Number one. But I mean,
Fox.
800.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that area there?
Yeah, but would you ever have imagined if you're Jim, when you're training your kids, okay, this is ultimately where you're going to head to, Judy. But to get to become the director of sales at ABC TV in Washington D.C., you need to start off down here, bussing tables.
I can see him thinking that, and just not sure what the projection would be.
Yeah.
But that here's the basis, the basics or something.
That, as we talk about my
That
dad,
was her hauling hay.
yes.
Yeah.
The same. Well, that was also learned. That was her learning, being taught by him. Just like when he said, Mike, when I was the milkman or the egg man, I always gave him a little more than I promised.
He said that.
I did a little more than I told him I'd do. And then he told me on the same way when Mike, in developing a subdivision, you need to give him a little more than you promised. Do a little, little extra than you. Well, taught Judy the same thing in making a sale. And I will tell you, I've watched for years. That's exactly what she does now, still even today, but man, it's amazing.
Well, he had a thing with Mike and I when we were young working. He would match every dollar we saved. So in the summertime when we worked, if we brought home whatever amount of money it was, and if we set, he would match it. So we'd work all summer long, and by the end of the summer, it's like we had two jobs really, because we had all that money. But then he would look at you and he'd say, "Now, when a man gives you money, that gives him the right to tell you how to spend it." So that would go for our gas in the car and the insurance and clothes.
But what a great lesson.
Yeah.
Again, just on saving. Work and make as much as you can. Because literally every dollar we had at the end of the summer, on the last day of summer before I started football practice.
It was timed out, wasn't it?
It was what I call a perfect plan, because he knew, one, I'm not going to be out going crazy blowing money all summer long.
Right, partying and
that was
going.
one.
Yeah.
But two, he knew at the end of the summer, if I had $100, he matched $100. If I had $5,000, he matched $5,000. But then here's the other unsuspecting prize of that. Now looking back, I did the same thing with my children. He did the same thing with my children, and my children both of them used that.
He did that for them too. Well, they were really making good.
Used that, but I did that. Well, both my children, that's how they ended up getting their first vehicle. Is exactly.
Yeah, I haven't paid for any of my kids' vehicles.
So
they pay for their own.
Well, but it's a great way to learn, and then they'll hopefully pass that on. But that's how my kids, because of money he invested for them, both of them had a down payment on a house. Then once they got married, and that's how they started doing that. So just a lot of good learning things that you don't even know that you're learning.
You don't even know it.
That he's teaching, or he taught
Sneaks
us
up
a
on
lesson. And my children would tell you the same thing about my dad. He did the same thing with them.
That sort of stuff flows down, doesn't it?
Yeah. It does flow down, but it flows down, but I've watched it too, Dee. It flows out too. I mean, my friends, I cannot tell you how many of my friends that my dad through the years just by spending time with me. Well, if my friend Dwayne Bunch or my friend Randy McCoy or my friend whoever's with me, I just say, "Hey, come go with me and my dad." And a lot of those guys didn't have a father for whatever reason, or just wasn't available. Or
Travis Henry.
Travis,
Yeah.
the same exact thing. And so my dad kind of became a father figure to them, and I've watched them do lots of similar things that I've just described that I've done with my kids now, them with theirs, just that they learned from hanging around with my dad.
Well, they were always over at the house. Every
Yeah,
Friday, Mother would make dinner for them before the game, and everybody was always over there.
Yeah.
Now, he also started. Friends were a big thing to Jim.
Oh yes.
I know he had the Rook tournament every year.
40 years.
40 years.
It's the longest running Rook tournament in the state of Tennessee.
Now, you think about that. That is a long time.
It's amazing.
They had them all. A lot of people were in it. Marvin Gibson.
Yeah, I've got a picture here. Can you see this, Gwen? I don't have it in color because my computer
I don't think we had it color, did we?
That's Eddie Cartwright.
Yeah, I can tell you a lot of those folks.
Harlan.
Yep, Harlan Painter.
Jackie Evans, is he in that one?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, where is Jackie?
Let's see, Jackie Evans is right beside my dad. Jackie Evans is right beside my
right
dad.
there, yeah.
Yep. And on
Jackie's a good guy.
Great guy, and still going strong. On the other side of my dad is T. Roy Jones, longtime, yes sir, longtime friend of my dad. Kenneth Tinsley. Kenneth was in this group forever.
I love Kenneth.
Kenneth and Harlan Painter were Rook partners for years. Dale Hughes, you can't see Dale.
They didn't go together, but they went together, did they?
Yeah, and it was a great
Yeah.
pair. Don Irvin, a lot of y'all remember.
Yeah, I remember Don.
Remember Don. Jute Miller.
Oh, I love Jude.
Jute.
I've got stories about every one of these people that I can't even tell.
So they got Bill Schultz.
Yeah, Bill Schultz. That's Dee Frisbee's friend.
Yes.
Dee Frisbee may be in there. I don't know. Was he in there?
No, I don't see him. Jack Hall from Hall Chevrolet.
Oh, Jack. Yeah, I know Jack
Hall.
well.
Marvin Gibson, that used to be the pastor at First Baptist Church years and years ago.
Shane's dad, right?
Charlie yes.
Shane.
Charlie Tollett, Rachel Lovingood's dad. Charles Tollett was the like one of the directors of the Tennessee School Board Association and some other things. But great group of people. Played Rook, started 40 years ago. I remember we asked our mother today at lunch where they started. And they started out on, when we lived out on Eureka Road in that house. And they literally would play. They'd start playing. They'd come and eat supper.
Why not poker? That would go against his Church of God raising.
Yeah,
it had to be Rook.
Yeah.
Because it was different.
Well, in Jellicoe, I guess, but in Jellicoe, he and my mother, I remember when we were little bitty, they had people over all the time play Rook on the weekends all the time.
Yeah.
But that group when they lived out on Eureka Road, started playing Rook 40 years ago, and they would come on Friday night, and they'd start about 7 o'clock, and they would still be playing at 7 a.m. the next morning. They would play through all the way 12 hours till they had the way they did the tournament bracket. And they did that. Now, as they got older, they changed their time up, and instead of having supper and then start playing Rook and play all night, they started having breakfast as they all got older. My mother would fix breakfast for them. So she either fixed dinner or she fixed breakfast for 40 years.
Didn't they eat at Eddie's house but the night before and then or something, or maybe
sometimes the night before they would go somewhere to a restaurant with the wives. And eat like on Friday night and then on Saturday morning they'd meet at my dad's office, and my mother would bring all kinds of food all day long.
That was a big deal.
Oh yeah, but they did that for 40 years. But then, like I said, they started playing then on Saturday mornings after they got too old to stay up all night, and so they'd play all day long from like, I guess 9 in the morning until about 5, 6 in the evening.
Some of these people look so much younger than they do now. Who was his partner?
My dad's partner for several years was Jackie, but then Jackie and he had won the thing for like, I don't know, 4 years in a row, and he didn't think that was right. And so they both took off in another direction, and then for years and years, my dad's partner was T. Roy. So probably the last 20 years, my dad's partner was T. Roy. My dad and T. Roy actually won the state Rook championship.
Is that right?
They did?
Yeah, beat 2 little ladies, and I forget where the ladies were from. But yeah, they did. They my dad and T. Roy, I forget when it was, but when entered the state Rook championship. and made it all the way and won the state championship in
What
Rook.
made him good at Rook?
He was good at cards. Now, he didn't play poker out in public, but he taught me how to play poker.
Well, he played poker in college.
Did he have a
very
memory?
good.
Oh,
Yes.
the memory?
He knew every card.
He could tell you every card that had been played.
I'd say it was as much he was reading. He could probably read the person pretty good too.
He was a good card player.
Yeah.
But even up in we were playing just to kind of keep his mind occupied. I remember Judy would come home from Nashville during the time he was sick, the last couple of years of his life. And all winter, I guess the winter of 2016, she and Dick would come home and we would play Rook all the time. And even though he got stage 4 bone cancer, he was still sharp as could be reading cards. And I remember
whipping us.
Yeah, beating us
He
pretty
and Melanie
bad,
was
but
his
trying to get a couple of our family members to pay a little more attention because now you need to know what's been played. But he could click off everything that had been played and basically who played it.
Yeah, he knew.
Yeah,
He was just good at that.
He's good with
Yeah.
numbers and stuff.
How did you end up at the radio thing? How did that evolve, or the TV station?
When I started to go away to college, I looked at the majors and what you could major in, and I loved advertising and public relations, and so I decided to do that. And then I graduated from MTSU with advertising and public relations and got my first job at radio, WHBQ in Memphis, which was the oldies station, and I sold the concerts to the Drifters and the Platters and the Coasters and all these groups. For the Peabody Hotel, I'd get sponsorship.
So you worked at the Peabody Hotel?
I
Or
worked for the radio station that had the concerts.
what was that like going there and all of a sudden?
Beautiful. It was amazing. Well, and I love that kind of music, the oldies music, and we would sell out concerts at the Peabody, white tablecloths on all the tables, and have sponsors. I would sell sponsorships. I was a salesperson, and I had all these people sponsoring the concerts. Everybody would go. We had 10 top tables. You listened to the music. And I was there for 3 years, and then I moved to Nashville and got my first job in television.
Was that a big deal at the time?
Yeah. I was Channel 5, the CBS station's first new business development manager that they'd ever had. I was one of 3 in the United States. Because at TV stations, you didn't have to really sell too much. Usually it was just picking up the phone. Everybody wanted to advertise on television. But then as things became more competitive, it survived on new business and dollars it didn't have the year before. So that's what helped me get the job in D.C. I was their first new business manager at the NBC station in Washington, D.C. And they had never heard of that. I remember I went into the general manager. We had sold this big campaign, Capital Pride, and I went in and I told him, and he was sitting there, and I thought, well, God, I thought he would act a lot more excited that we made this deal. It was $250,000 to run this ad campaign with one client. I said, well, you like it? Are you happy? He goes, I never thought you'd sell it. I never will forget that. I was like, well, why did you even bring me in here for?
How did you sell that stuff?
Well, I just talked about the benefits of, the beauty of Washington, D.C. was you had Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, all 3 together, and your TV station covered all of that. So Washington was one of the largest metros in the United States, and it was the 7th television market in the country. And so I would go in and we'd come up with campaigns. We're on your side for education, which promoted education and wanting the kids to be educated. We went to Los Angeles, California, and met with the second person in charge of Toyota, and they wrote us a check right there for $250,000. We made this presentation. Met with the number 2 guy for Toyota, Yale Giesel.
How'd you get to him?
I was a new business manager, but I had a salesperson who was one of the best I'd ever seen that she could keep calling, and finally we'd tell them about the idea. It's the ear of the nation, Washington, D.C. We're influencing people's opinions and everything, and it was a public service. And so they finally gave us a meeting. We flew from Washington. Sorry. We flew from Washington, D.C.
That's a $10 million sale.
Yeah. We flew from Washington, D.C. to L.A. We walked in, and I'll never forget this. I was so excited, and we made our presentation. And they loved it, but they said, well, will you excuse us for a few minutes? And so we said, well, yeah, what are you going to tell the guy? And he leaves the meeting. They don't come back for about 30 minutes. And they came back, and I thought, well, Lord, what are they doing? They came back, and they said, we'll take it. Here's a check for $250,000. We got on the airplane with the check.
Golly.
It was fun. I mean, we did all that and sold. My budget when I left there was $100 million a year. That's what we were supposed to be doing, and we did. But it was a lot.
TV back then was really big, wasn't it?
Yeah, television was the most powerful medium for advertising you could ever have. I mean, people believed if it was on TV, it was for sure the truth, and they had confidence in those kinds of accounts. And all the big advertising. I mean, I bet you if I ask you this, Winston tastes good like...
Cigarette should.
Okay, that was a jingle that Winston had,
Yeah.
and that's why they took electronic or television advertising away from the tobacco companies because it was so influential. They banned them from being able to advertise on TV ever again.
Who was it started that? Prisney or something like that? Some guy named
I don't
that
know.
started the whole. It's almost a hypnosis thing.
Oh yeah,
right?
well, I'd walk a mile for
A camel.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah. See, everybody remembered it from electronic for advertising.
And people would walk a mile for a camel that smoked them.
Actually, yeah, they would. It
Yeah.
was, but it was a wonderful experience. I had a ball.
That's over with now, isn't it?
TV,
Yeah, as far as big advertisement, other than the Super Bowl or something like that.
Super Bowl, the Olympics. Well, TV now is everywhere. I mean, you can't go to the gas station without watching something video cable at the gas station pump. I mean, it's everywhere.
You know, I went to the newspaper and I said, I'd like to run an ad notifying that I had a specific person coming on. And they said that it's X amount of dollars. And they said, we've got 7,000 subscribers. And I said, hey, I've got 8,000 people a week watching this. Y'all need to be advertising with me.
That's the truth. They need to be doing a sponsorship.
Let me tell you about Gobbles Automotive. They're on North Lee Highway, just past Captain D's. They're family owned, they're family operated. My whole family uses them. They've stood the test of time. They will do you a good job. Give them a try. They're no problem.
It's amazing how time has changed.
And what else changes? That's what I can't. If you could sit down 20 years ago and think for 5 hours straight, could you think of this possibility?
I think one of the things I've noticed just at church, Dee, since COVID, and we could all sit here for the rest of the evening and say some awful bad things about COVID, and there are plenty of them. Mm-hmm. But I would tell you, COVID made us think differently. COVID made us plan differently. And COVID made us make changes to our lives that have had some very positive effects. I know we at church, at First Baptist Church, we went from just odd example, but we went from maybe having, I think, 3,000 to 5,000 people per week that would watch online, and at the height of COVID, we were having over 65 to 75,000 people a week watch us online. So it made us totally take a look at how we did what we were doing online. And Judy and Dick they were in Nashville watching.
We were watching it.
And so you had TV people, and Dick, Judy's husband, been station manager at various stations. So I mean, he knew sound and he knew lighting, and he and I have talked about how much better our product got at First Baptist Church from when we began COVID to when we were, at the end, and even now. I mean, but sound, lighting, it made us change the way we do things, and it made us also change the way that, we tried to reach a whole different group of people online. So instead of just saying, well, gee, we can have 2,500 people a week come to church, or whatever, 3,000 people a week come to church. Well, now you can say, well, hopefully we'll have 3,000 people come to church, but hopefully we'll reach 100,000 people this week online.
And you have been.
And it's amazing. It changed the way we do things because we had to think differently, because church was literally shut down during COVID more than half the Sundays of the year. I mean, locked up, the doors not open. Well, you better learn to do it differently. And just by the grace of God, we went from, this is more than you want to know, but we went from, the people giving, we had like, when we began COVID, like, I don't know, maybe 20% of people gave online or gave, by just automatic, from 20% to way over 50%. People just learned to do differently because we had to. And so,
well, it's like it's like funerals now. Used to, you had the big funeral, and then the bad economy, '09, sort of ushered in the acceptance of lesser monetary funerals.
Yep.
Not that they're worse, but just a little less monetary. And then this COVID has ushered in the fact that it's okay not to even go to the visitation.
Yeah.
All you got to do is say, I was afraid of COVID. And maybe they're afraid of COVID too.
Yeah.
So that's changed. What else is going to change?
Well, I will tell you, in the last 18, 24 months, in the court world, we probably now have, I know one of my judge friends probably has more hearings by Zoom than she does in person, just because you can get, if you're a Nashville lawyer and you've got a Cleveland, Tennessee client or something, well, why charge your client, for 7 hours of drive time?
Yeah.
They're just listening to the radio or whatever. Why charge your client for 7 hours of drive time when you can say, no, we're going to have a Zoom hearing in Cleveland, Tennessee tomorrow at 10 o'clock. We can, and especially some of the big firms, we can have a really nice Zoom set up here in our office in Nashville, and we have really large, like your map set up here, your plats. We can have a really nice, and we do in all the courtrooms now. The state of Tennessee, since COVID, has supplied all of our courtrooms with really, really nice flat screen TVs in all the courtrooms and computer set up. So we have Zoom hearings now every week on a regular basis. Or if someone is sick with COVID or their child is sick, and so they're quarantined at home, you don't have a hearing now. You just say, well, fine, we'll do your hearing by Zoom, and it's worked very
if I was a lawyer, I'd want to stand there. I'd feel like I couldn't convey my story if I wasn't there.
Well, you can't really have a jury trial. A jury trial is a whole different animal, so you can't really do a jury trial by Zoom. But you could, just a bench hearing. It's just, now, from a judge's perspective, I'll tell you, you don't. I feel much more comfortable if I'm looking you square in the eye and I'm watching your body language. And
that's what I'm saying. This is the body language that you're missing.
Well, you miss that.
Not that should matter, but it does.
It does. People watch that.
Yeah, but it's
that's the Jim Sharp coming out in us, right?
Yes. Well, and there's nothing like just get on face to face, hand to hand.
Yeah.
I like that guy who just.
Yeah. You can't get around that, can you?
No.
It's very personal. People try to get around it with texting. I hate texting. I want to talk to you. I want to know how you're feeling about things. And texting just doesn't get it, but people try.
Jim's 5-year plan, his idea of planning, it worked.
Still does.
Let's think about him. Farm town in Jellicoe, school, gets married at 17, goes to college, ends up principal, Cleveland High School, becomes the Jim Sharp, president of Cleveland Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah.
He didn't come to Cleveland till he was how old? Well, you said 67?
67.
So
35.
35.
20 years later, he's head of the Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah.
A few years later, he's developing the most prestigious subdivisions in Cleveland. Not just one, not just two, but 24.
Won the MC Hedrick Award.
Won the MC Hedrick Award.
He loved that.
Well, some of the neatest things, and we were talking about this, some of the neatest things that happened, just some of this wasn't a result of having a 5-year plan, but some of it really was. But my dad was always a student, always learning, and as I said, a lifelong learner, but loved politics.
Loved it.
Loved to be involved in.
Loved the Republican Party.
Oh yeah, loved the Republican Party.
And Fox News.
But
Yeah.
loved, yes, and Fox News, yes. But loved to have a strategy and
Yeah.
loved to have a plan and kind of work the plan. But just by being involved in those things, and so we're going to help. Dee Burris is going to run next year, Mike, and we need to be ready to help him, kind of thing. And he's a good man, and so let's have a plan to help him. And now Judy, Mike, would you take old Dee to meet Judy?
Yeah.
And we'd be doing that. But here, I watched that then turn into, well, he was a statewide chairman for 2 Republican governors' campaigns. Ended up it was offered the commissioner of transportation job, didn't end up taking it. But then the governor put him on the statewide economic development team. They're going to Washington and talking to people from Japan. And so you take a little guy from Newcomb, Tennessee, or Elk Valley.
Elk Valley.
And we're
not
going-
even Newcomb.
Yes, Elk Valley, Tennessee, and you're off in Washington, D.C. meeting with some Japanese industry kind of thing. And it's amazing how all that just sort of, God just worked in his life and really just blessed him and that's one of the things was, oh, Mike, sorry about your dad. And I say, you know what? Yeah, I miss my dad every day, but you talk about somebody that had a blessed life.
He did.
Just by the grace of God from August 22nd, 1935 till November 27th, 2017, God's good hand was on my dad and blessed him every day.
He would not want one second to feel sorry for him.
No. Well, my dad had, by the grace of God and God's blessing, my dad worked in his office on Wednesday before he died on Sunday, and exactly how he would have wanted it to be. And so, man, what a blessed life.
Got to do what he loved doing.
Yeah, and do it, and that's why he told me, my God, I don't need to go on vacation. My job, my vacation every day. That's
the truth.
I went to, me and him won a gas trip. And we went to I think it was Puerto Rico or something.
Or Aruba?
Aruba, that's what it was.
I remember that.
And we rode the bus, once we got there, we had to ride a bus and then ride another bus. And Tamala and Sue started shopping, and me and Jim. And it was just I remember that was the first time I had talked to him a lot. And we were friends ever since.
Yeah.
I just couldn't, at the time, I couldn't believe that he was talking to me. And I was just a young contractor just trying to build houses, just trying to get somebody to let me build something. And I was sitting with Jim Sharp.
Yeah.
I had arrived.
Yeah.
That's what he said.
Isn't that something?
And here's the greatest thing, though, dude, and that's kind of you to say, but my dad would never, ever have looked at it that way.
No.
He would have
been honored that you were talking to him.
Looking back now, you're exactly right.
I mean,
But
Jim
who
would
knew
have said, "See, I met old Dee Burris."
I really like him.
Yeah.
But at the time, he was rolling, man.
Yeah.
He was rolling. He was developing out of both britches legs, as they used to say.
Well, and like I say, I remember Dee talking about a 5-year plan. I remember even when we came to Cleveland, and my dad loved being at Cleveland High. My dad loved education, but just as a young kid, and I didn't really know what this meant, but I hear my mom and my dad talking at night, saying that my dad saying, someday, Sue, I'm gonna quit my job and I'm gonna develop full time. And I thought, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And I mean, as a 10, 12-year-old
What
kid,
develop
I don't know what that was, but I remember he kept saying it, and then I can still remember where we lived. We lived
Is that Burlington?
on Beach Circle.
Beach Circle.
Beach Circle.
We lived right there beside Tim Henderson, and Eddie Cartwright lived down the street.
And sold the house to
Jude
Jude Miller, yeah.
And then Jude ended up selling, I think, that house is now
To the church,
Yeah.
Cleveland Church of Christ.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, the Church of Christ Church. But we lived in that house. But I remember, and it was
It was a nice house for the time.
It was
wasn't
very
it?
nice.
Yeah.
House. Very nice. House. Big old.
Yeah, big yard.
4 acres. Or
Yeah.
something.
Huge yard.
Especially it seemed huge when
Yeah.
you're out there mowing it as a 12-year-old.
Yeah.
But I remember though the summer when my dad came home and told my mother, made the decision, so I'm gonna quit. He was working for the state of Tennessee as the director of federal programs for the State Department of Education, and just gonna say I'm gonna quit this job and I'm gonna develop full time. And I remember my mother scared to death, and of course, as a young
Yeah.
kid, I'm scared to death too. You remember
I didn't know they were talking about it.
Judy was out making all those tips at the chalet at that time.
And you were 12, 13, 14 years old
Yeah.
at the time.
I remember when we moved from there. I was in the 7th grade when we moved from Beach Circle. But he
Eureka Road.
bought the farm, the first one he ever did, out on Eureka Road, and that's when he started developing.
So from then on, he was on his own.
He quit, no salary, no insurance benefits, no nothing.
He didn't have like some money saved up or nothing like that, right?
He had enough for 6 months that year.
He had enough. I remember saying that's
Yeah.
right. He had enough to live. He said for 6 months, and I remember hearing him talk to my mother about this too. By the grace of God, in 6 months' time, he had made more developing land than he had made the whole year before, in whatever his education job was paying, and I don't have any idea what that was, but I just remember hearing him say he had saved, he had enough from somewhere.
That was Northwoods or something like that on Eureka Road. I know where you're talking about.
It was
Eureka Valley.
Eureka
Yeah.
Valley.
Yeah, Eureka Valley.
He built a lake in front of the house.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did. And
He always built a lake, didn't
We
he?
love those lakes. Yeah, he did. He loved lakes. And he knew about them, too. He was very smart about lakes. There's lakes in Nashville, and I look at them, I think, gosh.
well, here's what he knew, though, really. And Melanie and I talk about this all the time because I'm not very handy around the house, and neither was my dad. But my dad
couldn't
knew
even
who
grill.
to call. So he knew to call Dee Burris if he needed.
I'm who you called when they
Yes.
ransacked his office.
Yes. Well,
Was
Yeah.
it?
I did all that, yeah.
Well, my dad was
They
as
tore
good-
it up.
Oh yeah, but my dad was as good as I knew at placing a road or sighting a lake in and those kind of things. But he didn't know nothing about the hammering, the nail, and the carpentry or who. But he knew Dee Burris, and he would quickly learn who the best people there were in their field or profession. And so he'd get Dee Burris, or he'd get Jackie Evans, or he'd get whoever. Construction to do the roads or the sewer or the whatever, and he knew who to call. And on a lake, there was a guy, a soil scientist in town from Jellicoe. But
Oh, is that right? Cannon?
Mike Hendricks. Mike Hendricks was a soil scientist that my dad knew from way back in Jellicoe, and he was here being a soil scientist for the state of Tennessee. And Mike was as good as I've ever seen, even still through today. And he could go out and look at a piece of land and tell you if a lake would hold water. He'd test the soil, and a lot of shale here. And if the shale laid at an odd angle, and the water would just seep right through, and your lake wouldn't hold water.
Yeah.
But my dad would always get Mike Hendricks to go, once he knew that this is a good lake site, now let's get somebody that knows the soils out here to see if it'll hold water.
He did. His lakes, really amazing.
If he was my age or if he was 20, would he be developing today?
I think he would if he loved it.
He loved it so much because he loved the land. I think he would. Well, he told me before he would have done it for free. I mean, he just loved it and hallelujah, if you can find somebody that has a job that they'd say, I think Judy would do her job for free, and
I'd hate to.
I do.
I have a good feeling you wouldn't.
So, but I think he would. Now, here's the thing. My dad was all the red tape that is now involved, as you well know, in doing almost anything, whether it's environmentally or just, the approval process itself has so changed over the last 20 or 30 years. It's like banking. My first job ever out of college was at a bank as a loan officer. Well, if my friend Dee Burris would come in, and I knew Dee to be a man of integrity and reputation, I could make you a loan up to whatever my lending authority was, literally in about 5 minutes. We had a promissory note pad in the drawer. I'd pull it out and say, now, Dee, how much are you going to borrow? And he'd say, well, Mike, I need $10,000 or whatever it is. Well, if my lending authority was 50, as long as I'm in my lending authority, I could make you a loan on the spot, cut you a check right there. Today, as you well know, to get that same loan might take you 30 days. And that's very sad to me.
Yeah.
Developing, my dad much more enjoyed what I just described. Go buy you a farm, and he'd be out there digging tomorrow. He didn't have to worry about getting, all the environmental things and the retention ponds and detention ponds and all those things that you.
Stormwater prevention.
prevention.
He'd never. I don't know if he'd have the patience to work through all that red tape.
It's hard to go from where he had great helpers. He had great surveyors and great architects and builders and people that he trusted that were really good at what you do, but it's hard to go from where that was to what it's become now.
I don't know if that evolves from when you start in the business. If you get tired of the red, if I came in it now, would I not be burnt out with the red tape? Or when the red tape gets worse, or if it was like this now, would I choose another profession? I don't know.
Yeah.
You just get somebody that's better at that than you are and get them to work with you. That's
the way things are now. You almost anything you do, you're doing something wrong. There's a rule you're violating or a law that you're not exactly. I mean, in order to you think about these. You as a loan officer. Say you were a loan officer now, and you have to fill out these financial statements. Well, they might say, what's your building worth? You say this. Well, if you're to be truthful, you got to say, now if I sold it, I'd have to use a real estate agent. There would be 6% off.
Sure.
And here's my tax repercussions to the IRS if I do. So that building to me is only worth this, not this.
Yeah, the real
if
net
you're going to be honest.
Yeah, the net value.
The net value
is only it. Yeah.
So do you use that value or that? So the more regulations and rules they get in it, the more they make you say, my value's here. I can't tell you.
I would still tell you, though, just on your original question, Dee, I think he loved, even up until the day he died, he loved the land, he loved the plan. Making money was, he enjoyed that.
I think he was over that.
Yeah, but
over the necessity,
I remember him
right?
one time telling me later in his life, he said, well, Mike, how much money does a man need? And so he just loved doing a subdivision and the plan and walking the land. I cannot tell you, even up until the time he got really, really sick, and he could outwalk me, and I'm working out every day and doing all kinds of things, fitness-wise. He could just walk, and if he'd just be engrossed in looking at the land, and again, sighting in the roads and sighting in house sites and where the house should go.
Taking the dozer man to the Cracker Barrel.
Oh, yeah.
that's exactly what he was doing.
It was a bonus.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right, though. You're exactly right. I can still remember those are men's names right now.
Yeah, he liked the vegetable soup.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember, it's funny what you remember, Frog, the dozer man.
Oh, yeah, Frog.
Yeah, and Art, and
Yeah.
all these great guys, but he loved them. But I still think the answer to your question, Dee, is I think he would do it. Now, he'd hire somebody to worry about the red tape.
That's exactly
He'd
right.
find the best red
He'd
tape.
figure out a way to make that work.
Yes. And again, just find, he had really good CPAs, and he did. He had really good lawyers, and he had, just people to kind of handle the red tape pieces.
And a son that helped him a lot. Y'all were together all the time.
It was funny. Yeah, we did a lot, and it was funny.
You know what he told me when I remember when I went to lunch with him when I was 50. He said, "Dear," I said, "Jim, I'm 50 now," and I said, Jim, I said, "Do you slow down at 50?" And he said, "Dee," he said, "at 50 you can do anything you want. You just can't make any mistakes."
Yeah, he's told me the very same thing.
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he said, "You can do anything you want. You just can't make any mistakes."
Yeah, well,
So, I don't know.
been doing good.
Well, we don't know yet, right? We don't know what the.
Well, you're still here going pretty good.
You're going pretty good.
But hey,
Wouldn't you love to have him?
He would have
sitting here?
loved this with you.
He would have loved it.
yes. Yeah.
This would have been his
Nobody-
thing to sit and talk to
That's
you.
where we started though. I think nobody loved a good deep conversation
Oh.
like my dad or like
That's
our
the
dad. And now the reverse is also true. He didn't have much time for this sitting around shooting the breeze about nothing.
No,
That
it
was
wouldn't
not-
be anything like that.
That was not.
He
his-
wouldn't even know where you're going with that.
No,
He wouldn't know.
Didn't have a lot of time for.
This is the way I remember. Can you see this, Gwen?
Yeah.
That's the way I.
Yeah, with the cap on and
Yeah. Yeah. Right up there.
That's almost the same as that previous picture. I mean, they're not facing you, but
Yeah.
they're facing the side.
Yeah. Yeah. Only what were they? Would have been married.
64 years they were married.
Would have been married 65 years had he lived another year. So that's just 64 years later. Just look and see. But they were. I remember that picture. He was out at the lake talking about having a 5-year plan. Even the lakes in the places that he built lakes. He would have the biologists come. So again, finding somebody
Yeah.
good at what they do.
Yeah.
Every lake he ever did, he had biologists come at least 2 times a year to test the fish and to test the water, the quality of the water, and to say, okay, here's what you need to be doing, Jim, to your fertilizer to make the fish grow, or to get the color. Your color needs to be just right in a lake to make it do what it's supposed to be doing. Producing food and for the fish to thrive.
I think he had a guy come out and told him how much food to put in that feeder that
Fish
he's got,
feeders?
the fish feeder.
The fish guy.
Yeah.
We still haven't.
Still haven't.
Judy and I still haven't come, and we still haven't come test the lake twice a year. Just learned it from our dad.
He doesn't know it, but he's not ever going to lose his job.
No.
That's the truth. Especially Dick and I were
He
concerned.
can even quit coming, he's not going to lose
No.
it.
No.
Well, but again, it's having that 5-year plan. So I want to have the best. What he would say, I want to have the best fish. And the lake I told Dick this past
Yes, he did.
summer, he said, this is the best lake I go to. As far the guy travels all around Southeast Tennessee. He says it's the best lake I go to anywhere. I mean, it's just that the fish are thriving, praise the Lord, and doing well.
Yeah, it's amazing. They.
And I can assure you, it's not because anything we
Well,
know
here
to
Dick
do.
and I, we're city slickers. We don't have a clue. I'm calling Mike. Was it supposed to look like that?
Now, Judy, you live in Nashville, but you live in Cleveland too, right?
Yes.
What's the purpose of that?
Well, the purpose is I'm a realtor in Nashville, and this will be my 16th year coming up. So my clientele is there, but I love when Mother, and Mike will tell you this, when Mother put the house up for sale, it about killed Dick and I. About killed us. Because we'd been coming and having Christmas there. I just couldn't let it go. And I never forget, I talked to Mike and Mel, and I said, what would you think about us buying the house and moving there? And Mike kind of looked. Mike always says the same. Well, I need to ponder that, Judy, for a while. I'm like, and that meant it'd be a good month before I'd hear back from him. But I could never have a place like that in Nashville. That's
Where
the
do you
truth.
get that? Where does she get that idea?
That's what he says every time.
Well, I just.
You don't want to make any mistakes?
Well,
Is that the
I
judge
won't make
in you?
mistakes.
He just likes to think about it.
I like
Oh,
pray on things.
I
and
think you
ponder
don't
on
want
things
to
as
reverse your decision.
well. Yes, that's true. But I tell people all the time, we're not going to. This isn't a sprint. This is a marathon. So why do we need to be in a hurry to make the
that's
decision?
right.
So let's
That
pray,
drives me crazy.
let's pray on it, ponder on it in a few days.
Now that's your way of thinking, and she can't wait on the 3-minute egg.
That's right. I'm like, let's do it, Mike. Let's do it. Well, I remember when we were doing the house, and I was telling Mike, and I remember Mike standing there going, "Oh, I don't know what's wrong with it now." But you did our house,
I
and
did
it
the house.
is.
No
we could
problem.
not be happier.
And you weren't even there.
No, I trusted you
Yeah.
more than I've ever trusted
Yeah,
anybody. I
yes.
told Mike I'd never worked with anybody like you as good as you are, and it is so pretty.
You know, Jim would always say, Dee, I just want you to do this the way you'd do it if it's yours, and I'm going to pay you when you get done.
Yep.
That was about the existing of it.
But you think about that, Dee, and I tell people that all the time. Hey, man, you do it just like you were doing it for your mother, or your loved one, and send me the bill. And that's about as good as you're gonna hope to get.
And you know, some people have to fit it within their budget. We got to realize. I remember Jim Dugan, the old builder. I was just a kid. I remember somebody said, "Jim, you built so and so," and he said, "Yeah, I was able to build it within their budget." He was real good at building it within their budget. So there's some value to that too in giving people something in their budget.
Sure. Well, and I don't know if I remember hearing my mother and dad talk for the, most miserable people in the world are people who build them a nice new home and put all the stuff in that they wanted, and then you can't afford it, and you have to sell it. Well, that's awful.
Stress,
Man. And you end up hating it. So you build something that you wanted to love and you thought it was your dream, and if you can't afford it, and that's one of the things my dad always said about people, in the subdivision, it needs to be something they'll love, hopefully, and it'll get better and better and better. If you're overbuilding your budget, it's hard to do that.
Do you think you could get to a minimalist lifestyle?
What's that mean? Is that?
I mean, like these people that just go into you've heard of minimalist. They really scale their life.
Houses,
scale their life down to just the bare necessities.
I've never thought about it, just to be brutally honest with you. I'll tell you this. I tell people this all the time. I love my wife. I love my kids. I love what I get up and go do every day.
Your sister.
I love my family. I do. I love my family. And so most of the things that I love the most don't have much to do with my house. Now, do I love my house and where I live? Well, yeah, I do. Thankful to get to live there. But most of the things that I love the most don't have much of anything to do with stuff anymore. Now, maybe 30 years ago, maybe it did, but
I've never heard that. I mean, that's an interesting perspective. I've never thought of it that way.
Well, again,
I mean, we like our house. We like
sure,
where we
live. You need a house.
Yeah.
You got to have somewhere to live and food and shelter.
But you don't say you love your house.
No, I'm thankful for my house. I'm thankful to get to live next to my sister and near my mother, and I'm thankful.
If your house burned, you wouldn't cry. The only reason you'd cry is because it was.
I would have lost some personal momentum.
Yeah, that's
I
it.
can tell you tonight. I hope my house never burns, but if it did, my biggest, and I would like to think about my only sorrow, assuming we all came out unscathed, would be, oh shoot, I lost my pictures of my family or something.
Memories.
But the house itself or the stuff, it doesn't. God only loaned this. This is how I look at this, and this is my view. So everybody's got their own view. God only loaned this to me for the moment, and when I'm done with this, He'll move me on to the next thing He's got for me. That's how I'm. So everything, all this stuff is just something
Just stuff.
It's stuff, and it's just something God allowed me to use, I think, for this moment. And I'm moving on from this moment, and so.
I'm trying to remember something. What was there? The fishing rod in the shed.
Matt talked about that at his funeral.
Was it Matt?
Yeah, remember that? Matt talked about that at the funeral. He looked at the fishing rod.
I've forgotten that.
It was Matthew. It was a verse in Matthew that Matt talked about, and he looked over at the fishing rod because he couldn't think of what to say at Daddy's funeral. He wanted to say something, and then he went down to the barn.
It was something a little mysterious, like the fishing rod was there.
And it was there, and Matt knew that was amazing.
I sold all those lots that he showed me after he died.
You did?
Yeah, there's something to that. If you've got a good friend that dies, whatever is on your mind when they die, a lot of times that problem will just work its way out shortly after. And I don't know why that is.
Look, he's up there
but
helping
you mark it down.
Yeah. I think you're probably right about that.
But how thankful can you be to have been raised by Jim Sharp,
Hey.
good friend of mine. And he's raised the judge and the top-rated real estate agent. Not in Cleveland, in Nashville.
Well, and I said my dad had a blessed life. So have we. Just one godly parents who even today.
Jim was all about God.
He was big time.
Well, and didn't make any bones about
No.
it. Didn't apologize. Just there was right and there's wrong. And if it happened to bother you because he's going to stand on the side of right, he wouldn't be mean to you, but he wasn't going to back off.
You know what else was kind of funny? You know how you go with people sometimes, and some people will pray, and sometimes people don't pray.
Yeah.
Well, when I'd go with Jim, he'd make me drive his car. When we'd go to eat, he'd say, "Dee, pray for us."
Oh my gosh, that's what he would do to Mike all the
What
time.
was that?
You know what?
There was a reason.
My dad was as spiritual.
I mean, I don't pray in front of anybody except Jim Sharp.
Well, I'll tell you, and Judy's heard this. My dad, the truth.
Why is that?
He was never comfortable. It was the funniest thing. And like I say, you know, my dad had dinner with governors and senators and whoever else, and didn't think a thing about it. Was no different than having lunch or dinner with Albert Webb to him. But it was he never ever was. Got totally comfortable in praying with you for you. Now he was very comfortable that you needed to be prayed for.
Yeah, and he would tell Mike
with.
to do it.
But I can't tell you the number of times I say, "Mike, pray for old D there."
He would.
And here's Dee's got this problem right here, Mike. He really needs
I watched
help.
him do that a lot. Of time I'd be like, "Oh my God."
You know, my oldest boy, I went to lunch with. I got to where I would take him with us sometimes with Jim, and so little D wasn't that used to praying around people, and so Jim said, "D, why don't you pray for us?"
To your son?
To my son.
Oh dear, what
and
did you do?
He was completely silent. And what was so funny is this was so funny. He prayed, and instead of saying amen, he said thank you.
Yeah.
That's so cute though. I love that.
And Jim didn't crack a smile, but it was obvious. Instead of saying amen, he said thank you.
Yeah. Well, and he would do
funny?
that with anybody.
Anybody.
Yeah, it didn't matter if now he's close to you.
Yeah.
And loved you. You know, so he'd be very,
Jim really did like me.
He loved you.
He did
I heard
like
about
me.
you. I didn't have a clue who you were. He loved you.
Yeah. And
Now, why is that?
Well, you were good to him. And
Well,
but you know, it was
You were
so funny.
smart.
I don't know. We just got along.
Yeah, and I'm gonna say some people, you know, D in your life that you just click with,
Yeah.
and he clicked with you, and
I guess.
and you with him, and hallelujah, I know. But it's the funniest thing I remember doing. And this last thing, I know we're going to finish, but one of the funniest things, the lots of times the grader people, the bulldozer people, you know, some of those guys live a hard life.
Yeah.
Some of them do. And, well, my dad, and he'd ask you anything, as you well know.
He would.
Yes.
He'd ask you about anything. Well, they might be telling him, you know, Jim, I got 3 girlfriends and an ex-wife over here, and it's bad. And so we'd be with them, but Mike, come up here. I need you to pray for old John over here. John's got 3 girlfriends and an ex-wife, and it's bad, Mike. But he never, and it wasn't like
No, not at all.
he really wanted to help old John, the dozer man or whoever, and it's just how he was. And now Judy's a little bit like this too. Judy can know more about you, Dee, before we leave here.
It's too scary.
Well, my dad did not care to ask. I said, well, now, Dee, what are you thinking there? And then after you tell him what you know, why are you thinking that?
Why are you thinking that?
And
There's some things I've told him that I'm glad he probably kept it to himself.
yeah. Well, one great thing I'm going to say, and that's why people would tell him stuff, I guess.
Yeah, I guess,
My dad never tell nothing.
Yeah.
If you told him that,
He
Jim,
didn't tell nothing.
don't tell it, he wouldn't tell it. He'd keep your confidence. If that's what you
And
told
when
him.
he orders at the Cracker Barrel and he ordered pinto beans, he'd order a slice of onion.
Yes. All the time.
He would?
Oh yeah, thick slice.
Oh.
Yep.
Oh. I didn't know that.
Appreciate you, brother.
Thank
I
the
love you.
Lord for Jim Sharp.
Yes.
Thanks for letting us be on. It's been
Yes.
fun.
Thank you.
I've really considered an honor.
Oh, gosh.